When it comes to the Jaylen Brown discussion, which came up during They Said It because of Joe Mazzulla and what he said yesterday, that is pardon the interruption. And I mean, interesting perspective. I think it is different than the Kyrie situation because you still have a chance when it comes to Jaylen Brown. And
I think Jalen's gonzo.
I know you said that earlier.
Yeah, I don't believe because the one thing that it seems like from just hearing Jaylen speak, you know, and just how he talks, the biggest thing that he wants is for people to be honest, transparent, and keep it a buck with him. And I don't think he's gotten that since he's been here.
So you think the Celtics have already blown it?
Yes. Yeah, I think they've blown it a long time ago.
And it breaks my heart because I am a Jaylen Brown #1 stan. Like, I think Jaylen Brown is the heart and soul of this team. Whether or not, you know, Jason is MVP, that's one thing. But Jaylen Brown, to me, is just everything that I want on this team, and it breaks my heart that I do think that they blew it. And the only thing that makes me feel that way is when reading that article, he does talk about that conversation he had with Brad Stevens and Jason Tatum, and you know they clarified and they made sure that he knew that he wasn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. But when he hung up that phone, it was more important to know that he still felt like the energy was going in a different direction. That's the issue here. You could say one thing, but if he's feeling something else, that is going to hurt you moving forward.
Can you fix that, though?
How?
If you're the Celtics, if you're Wick or you're Brad, you fix it. I mean, maybe the Supermax fixes it.
That don't make a difference.
You said you thought he'd take less money to go elsewhere?
I think he would. Because even if he got a Supermax, if you're Jaylen Brown, at every turn, and I know that teams pick up the phone and they inquire about players. Hey, what's up with Jaylen Brown and this, that, and the other? And I understand that, or Jason Tatum. Yeah, that happens all the time. But it also seems like the Celtics pick up the phone and say, hey, we give you Jaylen Brown for this potential player, whether it's Kevin Durant, whether it was Anthony Davis, the list goes on and on, Kawhi Leonard. So you as a player start to go, people aren't just calling to inquire about me, but my team, the team that says, oh, we love you and you're our guy, and they're also picking up the phone and calling other places and saying, hey, we would want player X and we're willing to give you Jaylen Brown. I think when you look at it as he realizes that he knows, even if they gave him a Supermax, if there was a better option out there, let's say Luka Doncic became available, they would be like, all right, we'll give you Jaylen Brown.
This is Mike from Rhode Island. What's up, Mike?
Yeah, how you doing, Greg and Wiggy? Wiggy, I had two questions for you about Jaylen Brown, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is, you're saying he wants to be the #1 somewhere else, but he did just come out and say that, racism in the city of Boston plays a part, and you being from the city, I mean, do you see that as an issue for players around here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from here, and I know that there's stuff going on, and as a black athlete in this city, as a black person in this city of Boston, that there's issues. It's like having.
Do you think it's more about that, or do you think it's everything together, or it's more because you said the Celtics blew it when it came to respecting him?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. But if I had to lean one way over the other, I would say it might be the race element a little bit more because he's from Atlanta. He's from a place where there's a very, very big black population, and there's a very big affluent black population, right? Yeah. So a lot of black businessmen and women down there, a lot of black people with money.
I mean, would he be a #1 on other?
Yeah.
On other teams?
Oh, hell yeah. He'd be a #1 on Brooklyn. He'd be a #1 on, there's a ton of teams Toronto. There are a ton of teams that you look at and go, he'd be a #1 on. And it's difficult because him and Tatum were basically drafted at the same position. Same draft slot. Mm-hmm. And Jaylen has played well his whole career here. He's made plays. But he doesn't get the same respect. And from the fans and from the organization.
And that can be, when you talk about respect, that can be just pure respect based on
his skill level,
your skill level,
his basketball playing ability.
Yeah.
When we ask about Wick.
I mean, he kept them in the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah.
Last season, a lot.
And people still wanted to get rid of him.
Right.
It's crazy to me
But-
that people don't watch these games and understand the value that he brings.
Is he a good player? And
He's
also,
a great player.
Yes, right? But is he on the same level as Tatum?
No. Right.
And-
He's not.
And that's what
But I'm beginning to think that because of what he said recently, pregame and postgame, about what the players need to be doing, I'm beginning to think that he is more of a leader on that team than Jason Tatum is.
Yes,
he might be.
he is.
I think he is.
Yes.
Right, but it's how
and I think that's frustrating to him probably also.
but it's me as a former player, I understand his frustration because it's how do you treat me? When we ask Wick about Tatum, it's Tatum's great. I mean, this guy's a top 5 player in the league, a lot more. When you ask about Jaylen, he gives him his kudos, but it's not to the same regard as Tatum.
Oh,
well,
see,
because he's not, his skill level isn't.
Right, but do you think Jaylen Brown looks in the mirror and goes, Tatum's is got more skill than me?
Probably not.
Right,
Right? Because that's human nature.
Right, so that's the only thing that I'm looking at. Brown knows that he is the same type of player that Jason Tatum is in his mind.
But he said himself that he knows that he needs to make sacrifices to be here because Tatum is
Now.
who he is. Yeah.
Right, but when he has the opportunity to go and he doesn't have to sacrifice, he's going to go. I would go elsewhere. I wouldn't want to play in the shadow of Jason Tatum, knowing that I feel like I'm on the same level as him.
Yeah. Here is Mike in the car. What's up, Mike?
Good morning, all.
Hey.
Been a while. But hey, before we get into my point, I just want to propose a new drinking game. When you get home from work at night, listen to the Greg Hill Show podcast from that day, especially if Derek, the Steeler fan, calls. Every time Derek, the Steelers fan, says Hill Dog or references the old show to prove that he's a long-time listener, take a shot. You'll have to call out the next day.
Derek appears to be both loved and hated.
Really, Hill Dog? Hey, Hill Dog, you like me, Hill Dog, right, Hill Dog? We're friends, Hill Dog, right, Hill Dog? Hey, Hill Dog.
Mike, I don't think you'll make it through 5 minutes of shots.
As far as Jaylen Brown goes, some years ago, I had the opportunity to meet and spend some time with Mr. Brown, in the job that I was doing. And I'll tell you, he struck me as a very polite, humble young man, which unfortunately was not always the case with athletes that I dealt with. But that said, I'll cheer for him no matter where he goes, whether he's a Celtic or he goes somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be here when his contract expires. Wiggy, to your point, he wants to be a number one. Little kids grow up wanting to be Batman. No one grows up wanting to be Robin.
It's a good point.
So let me just, that's a great point. So let me ask you that question. If you're Wick and Brad, do you sit there and think about it when it comes to your number one going forward, whether you want it to be Jason Tatum or you want Jaylen? I mean, I understand the difference in talent.
Right.
But the intangibles, are the intangibles when it comes to leadership, desire, effort, are they better in Jaylen Brown for the franchise going forward?
And I think a lot of people think that that's what they're lacking right now that Ime's gone. They don't think that Joe is a good leader for this team. So you need guys like Jaylen Brown. You need guys like Al Horford.
But see, the issue becomes like Jaylen Brown is having issues and talking about these issues. There might be some people who look at him and go, well, what kind of leader is he? And I'm not saying he's not when he's bringing up these other off the court issues during the season and these other things. And so there are going to be those. So you have to ask yourself the question, do I want the face of the team to be a basketball player, go out there and do what they can to help us win championships and not have to kind of worry about maybe some of the other things that they potentially could talk about? That's why that's why I respect Jaylen Brown. The thing I respect about him, he can talk about the issues that he as a black athlete and black people deal with, and he's not afraid to, where some guys don't want to go down that road. They just want to play basketball and kind of, I don't want to talk about those situations. And when you have guys like Jaylen Brown, I talked about this, he becomes the voice of many.
This is Dave from Natick. What's up, Dave?
Hey, morning, Hill Dog. How are you?
What's up?
Drink.
Frank.
So, a lot with Jaylen Brown. I think, there's still a chance in my mind that he might be better than Tatum from an all-around basketball perspective. But if you think of how the town's responded to him, it kind of reminds you of a toxic workplace where everybody's talking what about each other and gossiping and complaining about what's going on every time they lose a game or lose a game or two. And that's the kind of toxic thing that he's talking about. All you got to do to keep him is give him the Supermax and have ownership, demonstrate openly his value. And it would make sense that 2 or 3 years ago you trade him for 20 players. Now you'd probably trade him for like 5 to 7, and depending on how he progresses, he might be in that kind of virtually untradeable situation unless you're going to get a top 3 player for him. So I think all we got to do is show the guy a little bit of respect, and I don't think the city can do it because the next time that there's something that's a social issue he's got to take a stand on, there's going to be a strong contingent of the city that tells him, shut up and play basketball. I don't want to hear about what you believe. And that's also what Wiggy's talking about how we treat black athletes that are leaders.
And that's why I think even with a Supermax, he's going to say to himself, is it worth it for me to take more money or I could take less, and then I'm embraced by the city. And I brought up the Donovan.
Yeah, less ends up being 25 as opposed to 40.
Right.
Well, no,
it's a win-win. If you leave and you can enjoy your time off the court just as much as you enjoy on, then that is, I think, just as appealing as another $20 million.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. He's still going to make good enough money if he went somewhere else and got the 4-year max or whatever it is.
But in the Twitch chat, Zaddy Kavorka says, what about free cable for life? Would he stay if he got free? That's a considerable amount of money involved.
But he's probably a cord cutter.
But remember, exactly.
Yeah.
He's already cut the cord?
Definitely.
Yeah.